Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Lunatics. It's me, Phil. We got a full house. Lilith is here, Justin is here, and we got another special guest. We've been getting a bunch of good interviews lately, but another legend, Mr. Gregory Wright. You may have heard him on a recent Chichester chat with DG Chichester and Marcus McLaren. Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Battling a cold, so my voice sounds a little funny. But other than that, I'm pretty good. I was sitting here working on a secret project while I was waiting.
Ooh, nice.
You're not the first person I've talked to who's been working up until the last moment when we could jump on the air. So,
well, when you're freelance, you never stop working. But my day job, I work at a school, so when I get home, I have to use every second to do whatever freelance I have. I don't have nearly as much as I used to, but I don't have as much time. I'm usually behind my computer, working on whatever project I have. I wish I could talk about, two of them. But I can't.
I mean, that seems to be a sonic success in the industry where you're just like, I got like a project or two and I can't talk about it right now, but stuff's coming. That seems to be, what all the successful people are saying these days.
Well, what's funny is you get on a project that doesn't have a schedule yet. So they don't want you talking about some project that everybody's going to be talking about that may not come out for, a year or two, and then miss all of the, the promotion and stuff, where people go, what are these guys doing? Are they just, working off? Sometimes stuff just takes, it just takes longer sometimes. So yeah, that's why, some projects you just kind of wait until you're going to actually finish. Cause there's a lot of, I worked on projects that never got finished. And that's frustrating, and there was a lot of promotion for them. And now I'm still talking about them, 30 years later.
Oh, there's stuff from that long ago that never came about.
Oh yeah. There was, some stuff that I was editing that never got finished. Some stuff that I was writing that never got finished.
Oh, yeah. Sasha, I should say, that's how I was going to introduce you. He'd be like, yes, this man is a writer, a colorist, an editor, and most importantly, Dan Chichester Wrangler. But we were talking right before we went on about, you were saying about, how you and Dan have been friends for years and how, like, he helped get you your job.
The film school friend crew.
Oh, yes, the film school
friend crew. Yeah,
Dwayne McDuffie's in that lineup as well.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what's funny is I brought another friend from film school, and he worked in the bullpen. And then there's somebody you may have heard of, a kind of sort of talented guy named Dwayne McDuffie. And I brought him in as well. First I brought him in as a co-writer with me to help me sell my very first story. And later, when an assistant editor position opened up, I opened the door a crack so he could get in. But, he certainly his way all by himself. But yeah, there was a bunch of us from NYU Film School that came into the industry. Even Brian Polito, he went to film school with us, and Evan Dorkin. We all were at NYU all at the same time.
And I did see, because caught my interest because, again, it's one of the greatest figures at Marvel. Me and Justin are huge fans. You worked with Mark Grunwald, correct?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. Mark was a dear friend.
Yeah, I wish I'd ever would have had a chance to speak with him. Just the impact his work had on me and everything, and just everybody I've talked to who knew him talks about what a great guy he was, what a great sense of humor he had.
Yeah, he would have loved, all the technology today. He would have loved to have podcasts. He would have probably had his own podcast, and he loved to teach, comics and stuff. He was a very interesting guy. There's nothing about him was ever negative. He was the heart and soul of Marvel. I was going to quit the industry 2 or 3 times, and he talked me back off the ledge. It's like, I feel I was very, lucky. There was like 3 of us that got to work with him, Mike Carlin, Howard Mackey, and myself. And you won't, the 3 of us we can't believe, we can't believe he's gone, but we just can't believe what a great, a mentor he was to us. And we all went on to be editors and, freelancers and creators. So, he did his job.
Yeah, I mean, and he also seemed like such a fan, and like he knew he had his Marvel knowledge, like he was like an encyclopedia, right?
Well, he was the editor of the Marvel Universe Handbook, so
Yeah,
and the funny thing is when you work on that, you get very anal retentive about every little detail of the characters and the continuity, just as a writer and as a colorist even. And Mark would frequently call me and say, "Hey, this other writer messed this up. How about if you and I do a crossover here to fix that problem?" Or somebody had messed up Madam Hydra when I was writing S.H.I.E.L.D. So we wrote a story that we crossed over Captain America and S.H.I.E.L.D. and we fixed that little gaffe, which it was fun, because and he was very generous.
Yeah, that's like the one person. Like if I ever had a chance, just like, oh hey, someone who's no longer with us, that's the one I would want to talk to is Mark.
Yeah.
All right, Justin, you got your Silver Sable questions ready?
Yeah.
Fire away.
Yes. I'm a huge Silver Sable fan. I love Silver Sable in the Wild.
Me too. I love Silver Sable.
I hope so.
And I feel like that has gone underappreciated for a long time, and I hope that gets some type of love, like an epic collection or something in the future.
I wish they would put those. I wish they would collect it. I'm very proud of my run.
It's great. And I was thinking too, like at the time, I think there was only one other Marvel book that was that had a main female character. That was She-Hulk, which you also wrote an issue of. And I was wondering if that was challenging at the time, like if that posed a challenge, if it was kind of freeing in another way too.
Well, Marvel had these weird policies at various times based on sales, and they would say, okay, female characters don't sell, black characters don't sell. And every time we try it, they don't work. So a lot of characters just never got a shot. And it was funny because they decided, you know what, we're going to do Cage and Silver Sable at the same time. They kind of launched them both at the same time. And they, so they said, we want to do these two books. They want to take another shot at it. And I was asked to do a proposal, and I didn't get the gig. So I was like, what? I thought, okay, because my original take was much darker, and it was, more like, I was kind of basing it on, if you took James Cameron's Aliens and combined it with Die Hard, that was kind of what I was going to go for, except for with sort of a noirish bent. So, I kind of forgot about it. And then, then we found out who did get to write it. And it was a writer named George Caragones, who was best known for writing like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And he later went on to be the editor-in-chief of Penthouse Comics. And when I asked the editor, I said, well, what exactly did he put in the proposal that made you want to choose him? Because he was not a very well thought of writer at all. And, it's going to be a team-up book. So, it's going to be X-Men this month and Spider-Man the next month. And, I went, oh, I see. So he was thinking Silver Sable would be a better book to be, basically like Marvel 2-in-1. I thought, all right, if that's what you want, that's definitely not where I was headed. And a couple months go by, and I'm working on everything else I'm working on. And I get this phone call from Craig Anderson, and he goes, hey, are you still interested in Silver Sable? And I said, well, yeah, why? He goes, well, we had to fire George. And I said, and I said, can I ask why? Because I didn't want to jump into something that was going to be a mess. Well, he's written 20 different versions of the first issue, and all the editors hate it, and they just can't work on it. Because, when you're going to do a team up book with all these characters, I mean, just imagine, some unknown writer trying to use the X-Men characters. The X-Office is going to be very particular.
In the 90s, yeah.
The Spider-Man.
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard, to be fair. But apparently, he couldn't write a plot that anybody could stand. And then I was like, well, that'd be great. I'm really looking forward to working with Joe Quesada, because I knew Joe Quesada had been selected to be the artist. And I was like, he's perfect for how I want to do the book. And Craig says, oh, well, no, Joe's not on the book anymore. And I said, why? He goes, well, George drove him crazy. And I went, oh. So we gave the book to Jay Lee, and I was like, oh, that's great, because, I know Jay. Jay used to live near me. And I was like, he's another one. Well, Jay left the book too. Why did Jay leave? And he's like, same thing. I'm like, oh my God, well, who's drawing the book? And he goes, Stephen Butler. And I went, who's Stephen Butler? I just had no idea who Stephen Butler is. Well, he looks like a combination of Jim Lee and Mark Bagley. And I went, okay, that's a pretty good combination, I guess. It's not what I'm thinking, but that will look good. I said, send me his stuff. And I said, so when do you need the plot? Oh, I need it on Monday. It was Friday. And I was like, okay, and he goes, oh, don't worry. We've got a springboard for you. So, and I said, don't worry. And I said, okay, because they had just had enough of George and they just wanted to get it done. He says, okay. So we start out with a training session, and then, Silver Sable's niece is being held hostage in New York City. And she says, no, I'm not going to take the job. And then she sneaks out at night and rescues her and then teams up with Spider-Man. That was the springboard. And I went, okay, I can make that work. It has nothing to do with anything I was trying to do, except I'm like, okay, the Die Hard thing, I'll do my Die Hard thing with her trying to get in there. And I really didn't want to use Spider-Man, but it's, with Silver Sable, you obviously want Spider-Man in there, especially in the first issue. So, I didn't have any idea what the artwork was going to look like. So I'm writing, I like to know what my artists sort of draw like, because I try to write to their strengths. Like there are people who cannot draw, a house or a building or a horse. So you don't write those stories. You write, what they're really good at. And I assume Stephen was probably good at drawing girls, except for, my big direction was, this is not going to be a TNA book. I don't want gratuitous Mark Beecham ass shots of Silver Sable. She's already in a tight costume. She's going to look sexy no matter what she's doing. And I said, I want her fully covered. None of this other stuff. So I then, while so Saturday I'm typing away, and then I get this package of Steven's stuff, and I look at it. I'm like, oh, this stuff is really good. And I thought, gee, it actually does kind of look like, Jim Lee crossed with Mark Bagley, because he's, trying to do a lot of the rendering, but it's definitely sort of very Marvel-y and not dark and gritty. And I went, okay, so my dark and gritty stuff probably won't come off quite as well. But he's really good at action. His storytelling is really good. And he's young and hungry. So I, really went to town describing all the new characters that I created, because I can't stand it when all the characters have the same fucking body type. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
No, you are totally welcome to.
A lot of artists, they think all the characters are the same. They really don't.
Right.
Maybe Wally Wood, there was a silhouette sheet that I think he made of all the Marvel characters, and you can see how different they really looked. Because I've seen people draw Daredevil being, like 6'2", weighing about 250 pounds. And no, he's about 6 feet tall. He weighs about 180. Spider-Man is short. The Thing is shorter than Reed Richards. It's this kind of stuff.
Right.
So I really described all the new Wild Pack characters and the size that they are. And when I got the first pages from Steven, I was astounded, because this is the first time somebody had really, really put that effort into making them look very different. And in the first couple issues, they were still wearing those stupid purple and orange costumes.
Oh, I hated those costumes.
That was, because I said, okay, again, I wanted them to be like the characters in James Cameron's Aliens. And I wanted to change their outfit. That was going to be the next thing. I was like, that'll be part of the storyline. We're going to change the outfits. So Steven had designed new outfits, and I had done a nice color design for them to make them, I was trying to keep the book dark and mysterious. But when Joe Roses colored them, they were blue, red, and yellow, which was not what I wanted. But they did look good. And I gave them the color note, but I don't know, maybe the editor decided, I don't want these, because I wanted them to be like gray and black. And, I'm thinking, in terms of if you were making a movie, like if you look at the Marvel movies, they alter the costumes so that they just don't look stupid. Because, Captain America is the only costume that, I thought, oh man, that's going to look so terrible when they do the big screen. And then the movie came out and I was like, oh, I can't believe they pulled this movie off, but they did alter his costume later. And you buy it that somebody would actually wear, that costume. It's like the Daredevil show, they would wear that costume. If they ever put Silver Sable in a movie, I would just wonder, what will they do with that costume? Because, a really shiny silver costume would be really stupid for a mercenary. It'd be really easy to spot her. So I'm not sure what they would do. And I'm not sure it was supposed to be like silver, like the Silver Surfer. Maybe it was more supposed to be kind of like, If in the Black Widow movie, Yelena, whatever her name is, she had that white widow costume, and I thought that's kind of how I think it would work really well for Silver Sable, because you can go, okay, or maybe if it had some little button you'd push and then it was like camouflage.
Yeah, or like a mirror.
So it was funny. I wasn't the first guy, so it took me a couple of issues to get the book on track to where I was going to do the stories that I wanted to do. But and Mark Grunwald again, he graciously gave me Battlestar.
That was great.
And I have Battlestar. This is what I want to do. And he goes, "That's great. Take him." And the funny thing is, you bring up Mark Grunwald. He would tell me every month when we got our giant bundle of Marvel comics, he said, "That's the first book I read." And I was like,
"Oh, nice!
You're kidding me." And he goes, "Yeah." I said, I really like what you're doing. I was like, wow. Having your boss, your mentor, one of your best buddies at Marvel's tell you that's the book they read first, that's a big compliment.
Yeah, that's huge.
And Tom DeFalco, he would read that one first, mostly because, he created the character.
Right.
He always let me, I gave her whole backstory. I used everything that Tom had done and Peter David had done and David Michelinie had done, and kind of wove it into a proper origin history of the character. And, there was never a moment when Tom stepped in and said, "Hey, what are you doing there? That's not what you made." He would always say, "You're doing a better job than me." And that's a huge compliment, because I love Tom DeFalco. He was a great boss. But I loved his writing on Spider-Man. I loved him when he did Silver Sable. For that matter, I love what Peter David did, and I love what David Michelinie did with her. So it was a really easy character to write, because I just really liked her everywhere I saw her.
I was pleasantly surprised when the book came out, but I was also surprised. I mean, it's early 90s. I'm like, why did they do a Silver Sable solo? Did they tell you? Because early 90s, I always expected, it'd be one of the X-Men who would get their own solo book first, like Storm or somebody.
Well, because comics were selling really, really well, so it was a good time to try some different kind of characters. I think Terror Inc. Dan's book came out at the same time. They just wanted to see what, because everybody was like into the Punisher, it's like, what were there, 12 Punisher books at one point? I love the Punisher, but, that's too much. And I think I colored all of them. So, so this was like a different take to have a female lead character. But kind of going back, you would ask me, or with a female character, for me, it wasn't. I thought I loved the challenge of it. I had to, put myself into a very different mindset to write her, because I didn't want her to come off as a one-dimensional bitch. So I talked to a lot of women and asked them how they would react to this and how they would react to that. And it was really, really helpful, because that's what you do as a writer. It doesn't matter what your race, your gender is. You write a character, but you do need to do some work in research. And I generally got a pretty good vibe from the women who bothered to read the book, but women tend to not. They were like, "Well, we don't care about the book because we don't need to read a book that's just got a one of us in the lead." They like Conan. I did a and they had no interest in Silver Sable. "Well, you're writing that book for boys." And I went, "I am?" And they're like, "Yeah, we want to read Conan," and they wanted to read like the stuff that Alan Moore was doing. And I went, wow. And what does Marvel think you want? "Well, Marvel thinks you want Barbie." And they went, "No."
No more romance comics.
Well, a good romance comic, like something like Love and Rockets or something, would be great. But Marvel, again, most of us at Marvel were a bunch of guys. And, we did have some, women editors, but, they didn't know, we're all adults. We don't know what younger women are reading or whatever. And it's like, you really you need to get out and actually talk to the fans and see what they like. And Silver Sable was not as popular with women. I thought, the girls will love to read this. No, not really. Same with She-Hulk. It wasn't a lot of women reading books. It was, boys, and again, they're like, "We want some wanking material." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to do that." Up until we did that, Love and Money crossover with the penis god,
Yes.
Oh, yes,
I
yes.
At
love
that
a
point, we went,
self-aware king.
okay, and I told Stephen, okay, here, you can go ahead and be over-sexual with her. But, Stephen wasn't one of those guys that just, he wasn't a gratuitous artist.
Mhm.
But he did enjoy drawing the, on-page orgasm. And Tom DeFalco never said a word about it, so.
Back to the penis trenches. Penis god
Back to the penis trenches, yeah. We all survived it. It's still not a bad story.
No.
It's bizarre that I look at it and I go, wow, I can't believe we did that. There were so many other things we could have done.
No, I told you. I just assumed that, I read that story. I was like, oh, this is Dan. Dan came up with this idea.
It was more Dan than us, but it really, the three of us were working with Clive Barker. So
yes.
Oh, they're right. Yeah.
Psychosexual stuff that
Yes.
he did that we were kind of into at that particular time. And, again, sometimes you're trying to get away with as much as you can. With Silver Sable, I had a fucking racist character.
Right.
I had a sadomasochist lunatic. I had a lesbian assassin who carved off body parts and wore them on her neck. It was months before people realized her necklace was fingers and
Yes. Yeah, I didn't realize that at first.
Why does she have those? And I said, she takes I said, if you had read the book, Silver Sable at one point tells her while she's about to cut somebody's finger off, no souvenirs. And that was the thing, I wanted to take some risk with it, and nobody, I don't know if they didn't notice, but I wanted to do, I wanted to write characters that I thought were interesting, because so many times the background characters, who cares?
Yeah. That's what I loved about it, because
maybe I had a little too much fun with the background character.
Well, in a team book, usually they play it safe, and they pick characters that are pretty easily digestible or pretty standard or straightforward. But that's what I loved about this book, was that there was a lot of different dynamics going on behind the scenes. It was nice.
Well, there was something for everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
Although I don't know how many sadomasochists were reading the book.
Well, again, you got to remember the time too. This is when they're introducing Carnage, like you said, Frank.
Right.
Like 20
well, that was the whole thing, because I had wanted Crippler to be a series, and they turned that down real fast.
Oh.
So when we were doing, actually, back to Dan Chichester again. We did. I wrote the Daredevil annual. He wrote the Captain America annual. Annual.
Yes.
And we co-wrote the Punisher annual. Was it the Punisher? I think it was the Punisher annual. And we had to create these new characters for it. So we created these three villains, and I introduced Crippler in the Daredevil annual. And it's funny because Butch Geist gets the co-creator credit, but he literally drew him in one panel standing there. So he created a haircut. In the annual, Ron Garney actually drew that annual, and Ron really brought that character to life in the exact. I couldn't have, if I could draw, I couldn't have done it better. He just drew it so beautifully. I was like, this is my dream.
Love Ron Garney.
So I kind of think Ron Garney should really be the co-creator of that character. But Butch created a nice haircut, and but this is how things. If you hear creative, whoever wrote and drew the characters first, they get this co-creator status, which doesn't necessarily mean it's a 50-50 split. There's a lot of characters that Rob Liefeld, pretty much every character that popped up in X-Force, Rob created those characters, but because he had somebody scripting, they got a co-creator credit. Right. And in some cases, they deserved a little more. They deserved some co-creator credit. In other cases, not so much. But it's just the way it goes, and people love to argue about it.
And were you more invested in some writers, like when you were writing, like in the look of the character, since you were like a color artist also, and did you have more thoughts? Because I don't know if some writers are just like, okay, here's a brief idea of what I want the character to look like. Were you more invested? Were you more in there with the? I was
very, very descriptive, and it's kind of funny. I write in color, and what was annoying in Silver Sable was I wasn't coloring it for some reason. And, and I love Joe Rosas. He was a great guy, but he didn't always get my color notes. So certain things they weren't what I meant in color. And it would really only bother somebody if they meant it to be one way. Cause most of the time when I wrote stuff, I generally colored it as well, because I knew exactly it to look. And if the artist didn't bring the mood that I was looking for in the pencils and the inks, I could bring it to it with some of the color. So yeah, it's funny. I'm very visual. So, I was writing full script, even though we weren't really supposed to, because this is because of Dennis Cowan. Dennis pulled me aside one day and he said, you're writing stuff that you can't fucking draw. I'm like, what does that mean? And then he explained, because you're having them move in the panel, they can't turn their head in a panel. If you need a head turn, you have to have two panels or something. And I went, oh, and I thought, okay. And Dennis had wanted full script anyway. So when I started writing full script, I started understanding the page better and what would fit, what could be done. And once I wrote it in full script, I would kind of do my own little sketches of the page to see, little terrible things. But if, when an artist says you can't do that, oh yes, I can prove that you can do it. But I never really had an artist come back at me. I always said, if you can do a better job than I did, please go for it, which most of them did, which was good. Stephen, kind of stuck with, what I wrote. Mm-hmm. And it might have been better if he drifted off, because he really was very talented. And he put so much detail on the page,
Oh, yeah.
I almost go, geez, maybe he's more like George Perez crossed with Jim Lee, because, any little detail I put in the plot, it was there. And I hated, because I love to write way more dialogue than was probably necessary. But I hated to cover anything he drew up.
Oh, the first thing that pops into my mind is he did the 2-issue the Infinity War crossover,
yes.
just like the more evilly
Doom.
with all the spikes on the armor and everything.
Yeah.
Just the detail I put into that. You're just like crossovers,
because there's stuff that you're told we need to do this. And that means you have to think of a story for that. That wasn't part of it wasn't part of what I was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And we got interrupted on that when I was doing Morbius the entire time.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it gets frustrating. Sometimes it's fun and, but I generally have, here's the storyline I want to do. And when it gets interrupted, it pisses me off. But you have to make the best of it and try to do a story that you want to have fun with. You want the readers to have fun with. You don't want to go, see, this is a shit story. The readers didn't like it. No, then your book gets canceled. So I always try to make it fun. And the thing with Stephen was, it was always fun. Whenever pages came in, it was great. I was like, wow, these are so cool. Oh, I love this. I love this little bit you added. Because I gave him so much information about what these characters were like. He really, he got into the characters as much. So, and pencilers, there have to be actors, so he's got to, how does this character move? How does this character sit? What expression would this character have on their face? Because, I don't always put every little detail. And he was really, really good at that.
Lilith, you've been quiet. Make me nervous when you're quiet.
No, we're good.
Got a question?
No, we're good. I'm just
Okay. Speaking of female characters, Justin.
I also had some Morbius questions because you just mentioned the crossovers. There was during that Siege of Darkness crossover when they kind of made Morbius evil again briefly. Was that a decision from up on high that, like you were mentioning, that kind of derailed your plans, or had that kind of been in the making for a bit?
Okay, so we got this directive. Basically, I got put on the book because the artist and the editor were not happy with what Len Kaminsky was doing. They didn't quite understand his take. So I got hired to write really mean, nasty stories for Ron Wagner, who's a really good buddy of mine.
Oh yeah, I love Ron Wagner too. Yeah,
as we started doing that, and then all of a sudden, we got this directive from above. Does Morbius have to bite people and kill them and suck their blood?
What?
And I was like, yeah, that's the character. He's basically a scientist who fucked himself up and turned himself into like this weird vampire that he has to. Well, can he be more like the X-Men? What the hell does that mean?
No.
So, we were trying to find stuff to do with him that was a little more superhero-y, but I really wanted to, I was like, you know what? I'm going to just do as much nasty stuff as I can. So I did that, and I thought it was kind of fun for me. But yeah, I mean, the crossovers, it's just, there wasn't a single issue of Morbius that I wrote that was what I told Bobby Chase I was going to write. So all the plans that Bobby and I had with the character are maybe in an issue or two. The rest of it was crossovers, and we have to do this, and people up from above are interfering. And, I mean, what do you mean? Can you not bite people and suck, or it was like when I was editing RoboCop and Orion Pictures, whoever was there, the people that were in charge of licensing, it would say, does RoboCop have to shoot people? Can't he have a kid sidekick and a dog? I'm like, no, it's not the dog. This is the Punisher audience. Well, we don't like it when he has that, because he had that spike that would come out in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
We don't like when he has the spike. And I said, well, I can have him not spike somebody with it. Well, we don't even want to see it. And I was like,
oh, wow.
I hired Alan Grant to write RoboCop. And I was like, and poor Alan, I kept having to say, we can't do this. We can't do that. And I had to have this conversation with the licensors, and they would change licensors like every month. So every month I would have to have the same stupid fucking conversation with people who clearly had never seen RoboCop. And at the time, there was only that first RoboCop movie, which was extremely R-rated.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, poor Alan, I felt so bad, but, he stuck it out with me until, I left staff and the book went to Bobby Chase, but I had gotten him and, John Wagner and Cam Kennedy, a Punisher book, which was the Blood on the Moors graphic novel that, we worked on until I left staff, and then I got no credit on that. But they were happy to do that.
So with the RoboCop thing, so they just wanted the likeness, right? They don't care if it's like similar to the movie, it's like the character.
We were trying to basically do a continuation of the movie. And after it went to Bobby Chase, their licensors gave up, and Simon Furman came on as a writer, and he was kind of able to do what he wanted. But it didn't really feel like RoboCop to me until it went over to Dark Horse. Somehow they had figured out how to deal with the licensors. But that's a problem when you're doing a licensed book. You're kind of they can say no to all kinds of stuff that makes no sense whatsoever. Because I used to do custom comics with Bob Budiansky, and they would make us. We would do them like Captain America and the Asthma Monster, and we'd get the comic done, and you're trying to get it right in the health issue stuff, because that's the point. And they come in at the last minute. Well, we need all this other stuff added. I'm like, that would have been nice to know when the book was being drawn, because there's no room for all of this stuff. So I would have to go back in and figure out how to rearrange stuff to get that stuff back in, because they were paying us to do the comic. So, some of it was fun. I got thrown out of the room on the child abuse comic.
Oh, wow.
Well, they were going on and on. There were these two women, and I said, well, what about, spanking? We don't want to deal with spanking. And I'm like, you're out of your fucking gourd. And I said, there's a difference between a kid getting a little, spanking on the butt and being abused. I said, if you're trying to teach kids about child abuse, they need to know the difference.
Yeah.
And they were like, and I lost my shit. And Bob Budiansky said, I think it's time for you to walk out of the room. And I don't think we actually wound up doing that. I said, I'm not going to do this comic. And I said, we're not going to, I take child abuse very seriously. But I don't want to teach children to think something is child abuse that is not child abuse. It's like, I work at a school and the kids think that everything is bullying. No, you're not being bullied. You're being teased. By somebody that you just teased. I said, that's not bullying, so it's, I take it seriously. So, that was fun, but I got escorted.
Oh, man. All right. I have a coloring question. And again, this is going to be on a story that's, these two are on opposite ends of the spectrum on. I do see that you did the coloring for, 0 Hour over at DC.
Oh yeah.
So is that like a pain in the ass just because it's such a big thing because anyone in the DC universe can pop into this thing. So just like coloring, you got to keep track of, the color palettes of everybody or the notes there, just like a Bible, just because there's so many characters in there. Or?
It was a giant pain in the ass, and I can't believe I said yes to it. But Dan Jurgens was doing it, and Jerry Ordway was going to ink it. And I said, I can't Dan's a great guy. I love working with Dan.
Yeah.
And they asked for me, and I said, I guess I should do this. And the thing is, thanks to Marvel Universe, I knew all the Marvel characters.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, no, that's Marvel DC. I was used to knowing all these characters. So DC was, I think Mike McAvenny was he was the assistant editor. He went way out of his way. He sent me all the color reference on all the characters. So I did. I had to learn to color every single character, and I knew that DC was going to want the characters colored correctly at least once. That back then you needed to color the characters correctly at least once before I would do my normal thing of coloring them. That's something I felt like coloring them because the light was different. So yeah, that was a difficult job to do because there were so many characters, there's so many colors, trying to keep them separated, trying to do the kind of cool color I wanted to do, and also tell the story with the color. And, of course, Jurgens was like, well, we're going to invent this character that's a fucking rainbow. And this is before computer separation, so you didn't know what was going to happen. Well, there was computer steps, but we weren't doing them ourselves. So you really didn't know, what was going to happen next. But Dan and Jerry's art was so strong, you couldn't hurt the black and white. And I found places where I could use, some monochromatic stuff, effectively. So it was a lot of fun. And that's probably why I wound up doing Marvel versus DC. And, I did a lot of these big crossovers, and a lot of it is they knew they could trust me to get it right without a headache. And I can thank Mike Carlin for that. And that was just the thing I could do. You got to get, you've got to get people that can do all that. And apparently I was the sucker. I mean, the guy that could do it. But it was actually fun.
Is there any hope for any future Marvel DC things, or is it just the two corporate entities are just going to block that? I mean, just legal rights?
No idea. That's a great question. If you ever get my buddy Tom Brevoort on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he'd be able to answer. If you haven't looked at his blog, his Man with the Hat blog, it's insane. All his blog, he got 2 or 3 pages, but he really answers a lot of fan questions, and it's great stuff. He actually did a series on the Deathlok Chronicles, in which I kept chiming in, and he went issue by issue of all the stuff that happened that just destroyed us. Between artists being late, artists leaving, this artist being not being good, Dwayne and I not being necessarily on the same page, Tom being a brand new editor that didn't, know when to put his foot on our neck and say, stop doing that. So it was fun. So I would chime in back and forth, on it, and it's really fun, but that he'd be a really good interview for you.
Yeah.
He's a lot of fun. And he was my intern, which is even funnier.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So he started as my intern, wound up as my boss. But he was a great boss.
And then I mean, you did do a Daredevil arc kind of in the middle of Dan's run. So I mean,
yeah.
Were you getting notes from Dan, or were you just doing your own thing? Or
no, I mean, well, the funny thing is, I was writing the Daredevil annuals.
Yes.
I'd written a couple backup stories in an annual like Jerry Conway wrote. And everybody said, we really don't like what Jerry did, but these backup stories that Gregory Wright wrote are fantastic. And that was really the beginning of me getting writing work. And Ralph said, you know what? Would you want to do these annuals every year? And I went, yeah, that'd be great. Because Daredevil is one of my very favorite characters. My favorite character is Nick Fury, followed very closely by, Daredevil. And I was like, oh, this is a dream come true. So I was writing these annuals. Mm-hmm. And I loved, what Ann Nocenti was doing on the book at the time. And then I found out she was leaving the book. So I immediately went, oh, I've got an in to maybe get to write my dream character. So I sent in a really great proposal. I was really happy with it. And then I get a call from the editor, Ralph, and he goes, well, I said, your proposal is fantastic. I really like it. But I chose Dan's. And I went, what? I didn't know Dan had any interest in it. Mm-hmm. And they sent me Dan's proposal, and, that fucker wrote a much better proposal than I did. But yeah, his was much better. And, and I said to Ralph, I said, you chose the right guy. I said, they were similar, but his was just much better. So when he and Scott McDaniel were doing the Elektra series, they wanted to focus on that fully. So he wanted to take a few issues of Daredevil off. And he said, hey, well, maybe Greg can write, 5 issues and do an arc. And I was thrilled. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So the only notes I really got was where Dan was leaving Daredevil at the moment and where he wanted to pick it up. And we had talked about what his future plans with the Kingpin were, because I wanted to, I did include the Kingpin in a bit. And that was pretty much it. Other than that, I wrote a story that I'd had in my head that would have been in my Daredevil arcs if I had actually gotten the book to write. So that was a real treat to be able to work on that book. And I was really thrilled that Tom Grinberg got to do the art because I've always liked working with Tom. He actually did some issues of Silver Sable with me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he also did this book called The Squeege with me, which you've probably never heard of. It's a little indie book about this suicidal guy in Cleveland who finds a magic squeegee and turns into this superhero called the Squeege. Cincinnati, not Cleveland, Cincinnati. And the guy that wrote it was he wrote it as a screenplay. And he thought, if we do a comic, maybe I can get people attracted to it. And I said, I would love to do that for you. So he gave me his screenplay, and he didn't realize that it was a funny idea, And I said, people would laugh at a guy standing there with a squeegee. I'm the Squeege. So I kind of wrote it with that in mind, and Tom Grinberg drew it, and it came out. You can get a copy of it from Amazon. It came out mostly as a graphic novel, I guess. Because we could never get real funding for it. So the poor guy that, wrote the screenplay, that's David Lieto, who's unfortunately has passed away. He basically paid us to do a vanity project for him, which never ever made him a dime, which, I'm sad, but it was fun. Again, it was fun to work with Tom on that. And I actually wound up editing that, lettering that, and packaging. So it was a lot of extra work, and I was like, wow, now I know why you hire a real letterer, because I did it digitally. So I had fonts, I figured I can do this. I had Richard Starking's little comic craft book to tell you how to do it. And, it's readable, but I look at it and I just cringe. I said, as an editor, I would never have hired me to letter this based on this. But I did learn just how valuable letterers are. I mean, I already knew they were valuable, but I was like, oh my God, this is so much more work than anything.
Oh, that's what I've said. It's like letterers. They're the people where it's like they're so intrinsic to the work, but it's like a lot of times they don't get noticed unless something goes wrong. Like if they're doing their job, which they are 99% of the time, it's like they don't get the credit they deserve.
Oh yeah, well, both Howard Chaykin and Walt Simonson, they'll scream and holler about the lettering is an intrinsic part of my art. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the work that Ken Bruzenek does with Howard Chaykin, and you look at the work John Workman has done with Walt, I mean, it really is. I mean, you look at the lettering and you go, oh, Chaykin, Chaykin has nothing to do with the lettering, but it's exactly what it says. And they'll both tell you how much they learned from their lettering on how to, compose a page properly with dialogue and sound effects in mind. And I learned that I really wasn't very good at that, in my opinion. But, it gave me a much deeper appreciation, when you actually do something. You go, oh, this is not as simple as it looks. It's like, coloring a comic, they used to color comics where they would color the characters the same color in every panel, and then they would throw whatever background would make them pop. So you have these pages with weird pink buildings and green skies that don't look great, but you don't notice it because you're just reading the comic. And when I started coloring, I said, I really hate that. I came from film school where, lighting was very important. And I said, I'm going to do that. And at first I had everyone, why didn't you make the Hulk this grayish green? Because he's in shadow right now. But that's not his color. I went, it is when he's in shadow. But very quickly, these things I was doing, the actual artists would come in and say, I love that. That's so cool. This is how I meant it to look. And suddenly the editor's like, oh, okay. And then the fans noticed and they really liked it. But again, some of what I was doing, Steve Oliff was already doing that. He was doing that on Akira. And Richmond Lewis was doing it on Dave Mazzucchelli's Daredevil. I was just kind of using what my knowledge was. And I got, after I had a chat with Klaus Janson, I got even more bold. So I would do a whole page in just blue. And, again, the artists really liked it. As long as the artists were happy, I was happy. I'm trying to tell a story. I'm trying to create a mood. And if I was successful at that with the artist, I really didn't care what the editors had to say. And very quickly, they never said anything to me because they figured I would also bark at them. When I had Tom Palmer and Klaus Janson in my corner, what are you going to say? Mm-hmm. I got these two guys saying, no, this is good. Sorry, but you don't know more than the two of them. And they both taught me a tremendous amount about color. So,
oh, wow.
I literally am the luckiest man in comics. I had nothing but the greatest mentors every which way you look, starting out, with Archie Goodwin and Joe Duffy and Margaret Clark at Epic, working for Mark Grunwald, having Tom DeFalco, then having Tom Palmer, Kevin Nolan, Klaus Janson, just everybody that, is the man, or, so to speak, really happy to teach me whatever.
I mean, you had to have had the talent. I told you, it seemed like every other comic I opened in the 90s, it was either Gregory Wright, writing, coloring, or editing it.
Yeah, I was very busy. But I think a lot of it was, because I was taking some risks. And if you looked at a lot of the other comics, they really weren't. But, when Joe Rosas arrived, he was the first one that started doing a lot more little rendering on the characters. He had actually worked at a separation house, and this is before the computers, but he knew what he could get away with. So he and Brad Venkata really started doing a lot more modeling and extra lighting on the faces and on the characters, and it was coming out good because they knew what would work, with what was possible. And people like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, they just ate that up. They loved that, so they started getting a lot of extra work. So Joe Rosas he wound up being the big guy on the X-Men books, whereas I was more relegated to the darker stuff, Morbius and Ghost Rider and the Punisher and Punisher Warzone and Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man, which we did some creepy dark stuff on that. And I prefer doing the creepy dark stuff. And I loved coloring Daredevil when Rick Leonardi and J.R. Jr. were on there.
Yeah.
Whenever I got a chance to work on that, I just jumped at it. I would dump whatever else I was doing to do that. And when Romita Jr. and Frank Miller did that, their Man Without Fear series, I desperately tried to get that gig. But Christy Scheel, who was another mentor, and again, she's phenomenal. She'd already sewn that up, and she's like, she goes, "You just keep your grimy paws off that. This one's mine. I'm not going to open at you. You're not going to get any of it. This one's mine." I went, okay. John's stuff was really that much fun to color. And Christy's actually a fine art painter, believe it or not. So, I really admired her color palette, even with the simple colors, because it looked different, and that's because, she's a real painter. But yeah, her work was great. So, there's a lot of my work that I kind of stole from her initially until I started, really using, more color in a more dramatic way than I was stealing from Klaus Jens. I stole from a lot of people to create my own style.
Well, I mean, it seems like everybody's pretty much inspired by everybody since, the dawn of time.
Yeah. I mean, that's just how it works. Some people are just copying directly. Cause I've seen colorists basically, you're taking my color palette and you're doing what I do, and that's fine. Cause this is what's popular. So you want to do that. But, you see a whole bunch of artists, you can't tell the difference between any of them. You remember when Rob was really big, the amount of Rob Liefeld clones was frightening, and they weren't getting it right. And then there was the Jim Lee clones. And then there was a couple Todd McFarlane clones that were really bad. They really didn't understand Todd. And then there was a lot of John Buscema clones, the Jack Kirby clones.
True.
The sort of Marvel house style clone, DC, you had a bunch of Neil Adams clones. And, a lot of them start that way, and then they finally find themselves, which is, really cool. It's like, I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Panosian, but he started out kind of as an imagey guy, doing that image style. And the work he's doing now is just breathtaking and brilliant. It's like if you took John Buscema and Jack Davis and Mort Drucker and combine them together with heavy drama. It's just gorgeous. It's some of the nicest stuff out there, and he's penciling, inking it, and coloring it. And everything you see, and and you'll have the top guys going, "Wow, this is the stuff." So he did. He posted a picture of like some Thor that he drew. That you look at it now and you kind of snicker. It's very 90s looking, with the hair and all the what the hell is this rendering going on? And you see how far he came. Because people don't always, you start out with what you're going to get hired to do. And at some point you go, I want to move into being myself. And most of those guys that were clones of somebody else have done a tremendous job, finding themselves. Not necessarily are they working on Marvel or DC books because now they want, brand new people, which is why some of us just don't get to work for them very much anymore. It's sad. They shove us to the side.
So that's is that an ongoing thing? They're looking for new talent. And again, I say the talent pool is so much. I guess with technology now, the talent pool is so much bigger because someone on the other side of the world can.
It's always been that way. When I became an editor, I was looking for new people to work with. There was some older folks that I wasn't interested in. I mean, it's just always that way. When you get new editors in, they want to work. They want to discover new people. They want new talent. The readers change. There's a bunch of people, some of us have been reading comics since we were 10, we all want this one thing and we go, I don't like that new guy, and we don't even give him a chance. When McFarlane first came out, a lot of the people that were big John Buscema, what's he doing there? And then little by little, they went, well, this stuff's really pretty exciting. And, he really is doing some really cool stuff. And then suddenly you see some of these artists drawing like Todd. And you're like, oh, now you're going to put that in your work. I see. So it was funny to watch, because I was a new guy, so I liked all the new stuff. So it was funny to watch some of the older guys grump around about the new guys. And it's like, well, this is what the readers like. And I said, so you can adapt or not. Herb Trimpe kind of famously adapted his style into kind of a Rob Liefeld style, and people didn't really like it, but it got him work. And then, people think, oh, well, Marvel made him draw that way. No, Herb loved Rob's stuff. He said, Rob's really got something going. I'm going to try some of that. So he did that all by himself. He decided he wanted to do that. Cause Rob was upset that they had made him draw like that and that had hurt him. And he talked to Herb and, said, oh no, Rob, I like your stuff. I wanted to do this, and I love that story because, Marvel did tell people, draw more like Rob, draw more like Jim Lee. And I would have artists call me, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't know, because, I'm some of it is, put some more black on the page, maybe, more of this rendering. I don't know what they mean, because I literally got told they would give me, an issue of Spider-Man would come with some other artist that it wasn't very good. They said, can you make it look like Jim Lee with the color? No, I can't. It will never look like Jim Lee, no matter what I do, because he didn't draw it. It's like, what are you talking about? And even today, you can't make, with all the digital stuff, I can't take somebody else's work and make it look like another artist. It won't, it's like, and again, it's, some editors never seem to know anything about color, which, color or lettering. I don't know why. They just, I was lucky because I was friendly with the bullpen. I was friendly with so many creators. And I think coming out of Epic took every single part of the comic very seriously. I knew more, and I appreciated more, but, it was always baffling to me that they just didn't understand, like it didn't matter to a lot of editors what letterer lettered the book. It mattered to the artists, but the artists didn't get to speak up. Cause, when we worked at Marvel, we decided who was on the book and fuck you. That was basically how it worked, and, we expected, that you should be grateful that we actually gave you a job. And that really didn't change until like the Image guys came along, and dared to say, well, I'd really like to have this letter, or I'd really like to have this person. And the idea that they might quit if they didn't get what they wanted, suddenly, the editors were a little more open to, trying stuff. And, a lot of times, the suggestions the artists had were much better than what, we thought, because I remember well, can't you get Al Williamson to ink this? Well, I can't because he's busy on this. Here are the choices that I can get. Who would you like? And that usually worked for me. But I did. I talked to my artist. I said, okay, who would you like? If I can get them, that'd be great. But, because I really didn't want to put, somebody that they didn't want on top of their work. They're just going to be unhappy. So, yeah. But yeah, we could just do whatever we wanted. If I didn't like a panel, I could just have it redrawn in the bullpen. There are famous pages out there that I took a black magic marker and blacked in stuff. Mark Beecham would draw stuff that needed to be blacked in. There were some penises that showed up that weren't supposed to. I had to up. And thing was, that was just, we're allowed to do that. Now, artists would kill you if you did that. But if you're working for a company, the artwork that gets published is not yours.
Yeah.
The physical artwork is, but it's really not. And that's one of the nice things about, working with a lot of the independents. They're doing what they want. Mm-hmm. And some of that means they don't have an editor that they sorely need, because, their writing isn't very good. But a lot of it is they're able to do the stuff the way they want it. They can prove this is the way I think it should be. And it's very satisfying to everybody that I've ever worked with. They've been very satisfied with what they were doing. And that's a good feeling, because then I'm more happy when I'm working on it, because I'm not sitting there going, oh God, I got to color this stupid thing. But I don't make as much money.
All right. So does anyone else have any final questions for Greg? So we shall let him go.
I had a brief question about another Silver Sable question about the Intruders. The group that you introduced in there. Were there ever any plans for like a spin-off with them?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. The plan was to spin them off into their own book. Okay. And it even got announced somewhere. But then the powers that be said, oh, well, this book isn't really selling the numbers that we'd like, which was like in the low 40s at that time, which they would kill to have books selling in the low 40s today. Mm-hmm. It wasn't losing money, but there was this attitude where they didn't want their creators working on low-selling books. They wanted to take us off of that and put us on something that had a number one on it, because that was they said, just create whatever you want with a number one. And I was like, but I want to do the Intruders. And I'm like, well, but that's connected to this book that's not selling, so we don't want to do. But yeah, that was going to be a book, and I was all hyped up to do that. And then they canceled Silver Sable, which also meant the Intruders was canceled. And
yeah, okay,
that was disappointing. That would have been a fun.
Yeah, I wanted to see more of those guys. I really like.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I did a podcast where we did a whole podcast on the character Lightbright.
Nice. Yeah.
Which I thought was hilarious. I was like, wow. What did you think? And I said, I needed a group. And I said, she was like a throwaway character I thought up. And Stephen Butler just drew a great costume.
Yeah.
And I went, cool. Oh, let's use her a little bit more. Let's give her some character because the costume was so good. I mean, that's what happens sometimes. You sometimes do, like I think you had asked, about, do you always really think about how everything's supposed to look? And this was one of those cases I just needed a group, and I sort of came up with a bunch of silly stuff. And Stephen Butler did an amazing job drawing them. So it's like, I'm going to have to actually put some thought into these characters now. They're no longer just, background characters. So yeah, that was just so funny that happened. And the Spider-Man editor hated that we had control of Sandman. He make Sandman a villain again, and then they did this story that he got mind washed or some goofy thing.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
and I wrote in a Spider-Man annual for Ralph Macchio the last time the Silver Sable and Sandman would meet, because they said they never wrote that story. That story was never there. It's like, he just wandered away from Silver Sable? I said, she's not going to let him just go. So I wrote a story in an annual that it wasn't the story. I would have preferred it go a different way, but you had to kind of fit it with the continuity that they did, which was stupid. Mm-hmm. But I felt better about having, that part of the story between her and, Sable and Sandman. But yeah, the Spider-Man art, he just hated that. And he hated whenever I was using any of the characters from Spider-Man. And I kept wanting to use Hammerhead. I don't like Hammerhead. Don't ever use Hammerhead. I did finally get to use him. Because I always thought he's Edward G. Robinson. Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Well, if you find the Silver Sable episode with him in it, read it with his voice, and you'll go, aha, that's what he is. Because I wrote it to sound like Edward G. Robinson. Because I thought that's what he was. He was like, it's like bad guy. Well, when I finally got to write it, I was happy. I don't remember how I got to do that. Because he was supposed to be in the Power of Terror that I wrote for the Spider-Man editor, which was a Deathlok Spider-Man crossover that they made me shove the Punisher and Daredevil into. But I wanted to use him in it originally, and no, you can't. I hate that character. Okay.
He's too over the top. The character's over the top. What do you want?
Well, comics should be fun.
Yeah.
I love over the top, silly, goofy, characters. It's like I think when Speedball came out, it was so stupid, and then Fabian Mark Bagley took him into the New Warriors and made him awesome. That is what I want to do with every character that everybody ever thought was lame. I want to do something like Fabian and Mark Bagley did and make them cool, make them fun. Because, again, comics, they're supposed to be fun. Yeah. And that's what I tried to do was I had fun, even when I was complaining.
Nice. Any final thoughts, Lilith?
Nope, we're good.
You know what? You know where I'm going, Lilith. I'm glad you're a big fan of Daredevil, Greg, because when Born Again comes out, Lilith and I are going to cover it episode by episode.
Oh, cool.
And we're looking for guests for each episode, so if you want to guest on one of the episodes,
I'll be happy to. I'm dying to see what they do with that. I loved the original Daredevils that they did on Netflix. I was like, wow, this is. I loved what they did with the Punisher. I liked what they did with Elektra because as much as I like Jennifer Garner, I hated her as Elektra. Except for in Deadpool Wolverine, I thought she was fun. She that was full of. That's a fun movie. If you didn't see that one, I just sat there grinning the whole time. I'm like, this is all the fan stuff you ever wanted. I mean, you got every bit of every Wolverine thing you ever wanted to see. And you got to see Wolverine acting like the Wolverine you always wanted to see. Because a lot of times in the comics they just couldn't let him go that far. Because we weren't allowed to show blood, and we weren't allowed to show, stuff going through people. We weren't really allowed to cut people's heads off. But I did some of that in Morbius. They didn't yell at me, but they just wanted him not to suck blood. Yeah, I'd love it. I can't wait to see what they do with that. It's
Yeah, Lilith has a point. At least they didn't go make you do the Spider-Man animated series from the 90s where he had those suckers on his hands, which were the worst scarier.
It's so funny that the people that do some of the other stuff have not read the comics. So they have these weird ideas of how stuff is. Because they were doing video games, so I consulted on a bunch of video games with like the Wild Pack characters, and then there was a bunch of characters that I didn't even remember creating that they were going to use in a video game, and I had to like make up the histories for them. And like if you read the comic, you might understand it, And then there was like an episode of Spider-Man, one of the old anime series that had Silver Sable and the Wild Pack on it. And I spent hours going over all this stuff, and then the Wild Pack showed up for like 2 seconds, and none of their personalities were in there. I was like, "Oh, that's too bad." Yeah. I mean, it was fun to see them there, but they didn't. They didn't really care. Yeah, the Silver Sable movie they were going to do was interesting because when I saw they were going to use my racist character, I was like, "Why him?" They'd created a different version of my lesbian assassin character.
Oh, okay.
That's who they were going to use. It's like, really? Huh. But that movie never got made, but I would still love to see a Silver. There's so many amazing actresses that could do such a great job with that character these days. I don't even know how you would pick one, because I'm amazed at all these, the Black Widow was, amazing stuff. There's all these like female action movies happening now that, they're just amazing, and I watched, I've been watching Banshee. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It was TV show, and they've got this woman playing a Russian woman who was a spy or something, and they have her fighting, and oh my God, she's just so vicious. And I'm like, oh, this is, you didn't used to see that kind of stuff, so they could do a great Silver Sable movie now. But we'll see if we ever see. Probably not, since Sony still has the Spider-Man thing, and they've done it. I haven't seen Craven. Have you guys seen Craven?
Not yet.
Yeah, I saw it.
I've been waiting for it to come to streaming.
Yeah, I wasn't.
That's what I wait for, so much stuff to come to streaming, and
yeah, it was
then
a
if
bit
it
of a mess.
sucks, I go, oh well, I only wasted a couple hours and not money.
$30,
Exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, because Sony made the wise decision not to do the Silver Sable and Black Cat movie and do Madam Web instead.
That was just so terrible, and it wasn't. The actresses that were in it were good.
No, but it's just
the movie
material.
was so terrible. Like, wow, did they not realize how bad this was? I'm like, you waited to the last second to get them all dressed up, and it's like, yeah, that was terrible. I figured it couldn't be as bad as everybody said, but yes, it was. Like Morbius was terrible. I was like, what were you thinking? And it's not because I wrote the character. I'm just like, this is a bad movie, and I love Jared Leto, or however you pronounce his name. So I thought, oh, maybe he'll be cool. No.
Nope.
But they can't all be winners.
Yeah.
I'm actually very excited for the new Captain America movie.
Oh yes, next weekend. Yes.
I love Anthony Mackie. I think he's. I actually really love the Falcon and the Winter Soldier series. I thought it was just, there was so much stuff that they really went for. So I'm really looking forward to that. Harrison Ford as the Hulk just cracks me up. Or as the Red Hulk, But I'm wondering if they're going to, Harrison Ford is the best, hand actor in the business. If you ever watch his movie, his hands are great, the way he does stuff with them. So I'm hoping that the Hulk will have lots of cool hand acting.
Yeah. I hope so too.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's the superhero movie I'm really looking at. That and Thunderbolts looks like a lot of fun. That looks like it's a smart-assy movie that it's like, oh, I probably would have written something like that. I love these characters that are they good guys? Are they bad guys? Are they going to do something terrible? That's, to me, that's what's fun is, when you're not quite sure.
That was half the Wild Pack.
Well, that was the entire Wild Pack, but her Silver Sable's entire point was she was taking the people that were, finished and trying to give them a second chance to kind of redeem them. Which is my thinking, which is why it's like, why would you choose Sandman? I was like, oh, she redeemed him. And that was kind of a little thing I was trying to do in the background to, redeem them. It's like, because my racist character was getting less and less racist because, he had to work with Battlestar, who saved his life numerous times.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a kind of fun thing, was to, I wanted to keep characters that would react to each other, in a volatile manner because, again, aliens, when you look at the Marines and aliens,
Oh, right.
It was just fun to watch them. Even the littlest parts, it all worked, beautifully. You probably might find some stolen dialogue from aliens somewhere. And so
We won't tell.
Possible. I really tried. I hope I didn't use Game Over, man. Game Over. Because man, when, Bill Paxton was he was so great in that movie.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. He was great.
I was very influenced by a lot of that. So there's dialogue that may have been, confiscated from other places.
All right. So thank you, sir, for your time. This has been a great conversation.
Yes,
I love talking about Silver Sable.
We will definitely be in contact about being on an episode for Daredevil Born Again. But I know you said there's projects you can't talk about yet, but is there anything you're working on right now that you can talk about that you want to promote?
The one I can talk about, because it's still in Kickstarter, is I'm working on Graham Nolan's Escape from Monster Island. It's the third part of his Monster Island trilogy. It's another one of those. It's a really fun comic, a lot of big goofy monsters, and it's a lot of fun. So I'm working on that right now. That's not what's on my board at the moment, right? but I'm working on that. But I can tell you, I'm working with Ron Wagner and Larry Hama on a project. Not really Larry Hama. He finished his part years ago. So Ron and I are finishing up this project, which is great to get to work with Ron again, because he's one of the really greats that I don't think a lot of people know his work. He was on Morbius, but he also did Ghost Rider. He did some Punisher. He did some Daredevil. He did this great thing called Nth Man that I don't know if anybody's ever seen.
He did a little bit of Batman stuff. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. But he's amazing, and I'm super proud of this project that he and I are working on. So when it comes out, I'll be just thrilled to see it in print. I'm just thrilled to death with it.
Nice.
Is there any social media or anything else you want to promote?
I'm still hanging out on Facebook. That's the best place to find me generally. But I am over on Blue Sky. On Instagram, I'm there, but I only post pictures of food most of the time on maybe things I've 3D printed. But Facebook currently, it's that's where I've got my connections with everybody. I'm in a lot of the fan groups on there, so it's easy to find me. I am on X, but I rarely ever go on there because it's like a cesspool to me.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty good. I mean, I'm very easy to find and reach. And on Facebook, I've been writing essays on my time in comics that are sort of humorous in a way, but are fairly biting. Which it was funny. I was actually inspired by all these so-called historians and fans who think they know how things actually work. And I was like, no, if you haven't actually worked in a comic book, you don't know how it works. And here's everything you're wrong about. And it, really it entertained a lot of people. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll write a few more things on, it's like, here's how lettering actually works. You think this book sucks? Let's go into why maybe this book sucks. The writer sucked. Does he, or did the editor fuck it up? Or did somebody above the editor fuck it up? You'll find all kinds of stories where people above the editor said, nope, you got to do, that you can't do this in the story. They have to change this, and then you got to change it, or people quit because their story was interfered with. I mean, it's really pretty complicated. It's very rare that, it's straightforward why something didn't work out. Because nobody tries to make a crappy comic. Well, that's not true. There was at least one or two editors I know that sabotaged comics to make them suck so they get canceled. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But it's so rare. I mean, everybody wants to put out a good comic. Marvel wants to put out a good comic and be like, Marvel's just trying to ruin this. No, yeah, that's what Marvel's doing. Oh, you know what? Maybe if we ruin our characters, that'll make us money. No. Everybody's trying really hard to make a great book, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. You never know what the fans are going to like. Who there's stuff. I thought people would love the Fool Killer book that Steve Gerber did. What? It's a phenomenally written comic, but it just didn't catch. I love coloring that because I love reading it.
All right, everyone. Great, Gregory Wright. Thank you, sir. And I love before you're just like, yeah, I'm feeling a little under weather, and then meanwhile, look how long you've gone, sir.
I felt a lot better. So I also love the sound of my own voice. So that
no wonder you're friends with Dan.
He's got a much better voice than I do, though. I love the sound of his voice.
It's because he always brings out the good mic for us.
All right, everyone. The great Gregory Wright. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Have me back anytime.